welcome to CreatorZAnon. I'm your host, James, and this is my co-host, Seth.
Hey, guys.
Before we get into our show, we're going to run a promo for a podcast that we both strongly recommend.
We will be right back. Enjoy.
Hey, everyone. I'm Keenan, your Gundam guide.
I'm Jeffrey, your Gundam gay.
And we're the Gundam Guys! Join us as we make our way through the entire Gundam franchise from the beginning. I'll bring the knowledge.
And I'll bring the snacks.
See you soon!
Thank you for listening to that promo. And on today's episode, we have Pepito. You guys may know him as Element 7. He's all over TikTok. He's all over YouTube. People call him the lore master of Star Wars. Pepito, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
It's a very fun day, and I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Me too, man. It's going to be great.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
definitely. It's a privilege.
So before we get into the show, where can our listeners find you on all the socials?
So I'm on Twitter at Element7X, all spelled out. I'm on Instagram at ElementXStyle. You could find me on YouTube, Element7. And of course, probably one of my more well-known socials is TikTok at _Element7 _.
Awesome. So as we're getting into the show, tell us a little bit about yourself. How'd you get into Star Wars? Just give us a little background on you.
So I go by the tag Element7. Professionally, I'm a game designer for about 5 years now with a background in graphic design before that. And I work mostly on early childhood learning games and UX design. So I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way before I got the question, have you worked on Fortnite? I'm a huge Star Wars fan, obviously. The way I got into Star Wars was, I'm assuming the way everyone else got into Star Wars. My older brother, came home with a VHS of A New Hope, showed me the movie, and I was just like, afterwards, I was like, I want to be a Jedi. And is there more of this? And we saw the rest of the trilogy, and I've been hooked ever since. And what I've been pursuing recently is being a content creator for the purposes of enhancing and promoting a healthy and positive Star Wars fandom. Because I know we can all get caught up in like the logistics of being a fan, right? Like, what's a true fan? Do you know who said this at one given point? What's the timestamp this happened? Or just in general, there's an air of toxicity in any fandom, but Star Wars especially. And I kept seeing fans being brought down and admonished for their interests in Star Wars, whether it was just like an isolated interest, if it was just they like a TV show and they didn't like a certain movie, and especially when it comes to the sequels. So I wanted to give those fans a voice, because like too many creators or content out there is just drag Star Wars. And that old adage, right? Nobody hates Star Wars more than Star Wars fans. And
okay, I heard that adage, but it was for the original series of Star Trek.
What? So it works both ways, I guess, or it works for multiple fandoms.
Yeah, and I know Star Wars has a very toxic element to their fandom, but you are like a shining light for it. You, Darth Choco, and a few others on TikTok, you guys handle it so well. And whenever I watch your guys' videos and everything, and I'm flipping through TikTok, I always stop to watch your whole video, because you guys are just like this open door for Star Wars, and you guys are just inviting people in, and I can't help but love that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me, especially like it gives me affirmation for what I'm doing, because I kind of wanted to flip the script and just like give people a place to voice their love for Star Wars without like any kind of recourse. And so my ultimate goal was that all fans can love what they love and spend time enjoying what they love. Like, because of course it's okay to not like things, or be critical about the things we love. But at the end of the day, I think people can be happier focusing on the positives instead of spending time complaining about the negatives. So I like to say, yes, I have criticisms of the sequels, for example, but I voice those critiques and then I move on to talking about what I love, because I'm happier focusing on those things. Like I would rather be talking about what I loved about The Last Jedi than what I hated about it. And that's just how I try to live.
See, I don't understand why. I haven't seen a bad Star Wars movie, and I don't know if that makes me a bad Star Wars fan, but I don't look for what I hate about the movies when I sit down and watch them. Like, everybody was like, I hate Jar Jar Binks from the prequels, and I was just like, how could you hate him? He's like the embodiment of what George Lucas wanted these movies to be. He is the I'm for kids element. He is the comedy relief element. He is the Ewok of the prequels.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it, because I don't hate any of the Star Wars movies either. Now, when people ask me what my rankings are, and I post my rankings, and they see a particular movie on the bottom, they're like, "Why do you hate this movie?" I don't like this. This ranking is literally from most liked to liked, and it's not like this like reductive, assessment of the movies or I try to focus on a non-zero sum policy when I'm ranking these movies. Like, I don't need any of the other movies to be brought down, or I don't need them to suffer just because I have my personal favorites. So, and that's why my top 3 is the best, in my opinion, the best of each trilogy, instead of kind of like stacking it in one era.
Yeah, I have a yearly tradition where I go back and I watch the movies, and me and my son are about to start watching them. This is gonna be his first time watching them all the way through. He's 4 years old. Well, he's seen them, but this is probably gonna be the first time that he'll remember them.
Yeah, that's gonna be an experience for sure.
So, you were sharing a little story about your brother brought home a VHS of Star Wars, and that's how you were introduced to it. And I want to tell you how I was introduced to Star Wars, because my dad was a huge fan of the original trilogy. He got to watch them all in theaters for the first time. He got to live it. And in my hometown, we had this little theater that would play old movies or trilogies of movies. But I would always see the Star Wars VHSs, and I'm like, "Dad, can we watch this?" He'd be like, "Nope, nope, 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 nope." And finally, when I was about 7 years old, the local theater was like, "Watch the trilogy from beginning to end." And it was only like $8 to go watch all 3 movies. So my dad got me and my brother, loaded us up, and we went down there in the afternoon. We didn't end up leaving till like 1 o'clock in the morning, but we watched all 3 movies on the big screen for the first time, and it blew my. I've been hooked ever since.
That must have been an epic experience, and I consider our generation lucky in the sense that once we got into Star Wars, we at least had the whole trilogy, whereas the people before us had to wait for each movie.
Yep.
So it makes the experience that much more enjoyable.
All right, Seth, how'd you get into Star Wars?
Kind of the same way he did. My brother was just like, "You know what? We need to sit down and watch this." We sat down in the living room and started watching, and then eventually I was a little kid and I broke the cassette and we got in a fight, and then we kept watching.
Oh no.
So it was worth it, though. It was a great movie, and I loved it. Can you help kind of explain what Echoes of the Past is, and how does it add to the story of Star Wars lore, in your opinion?
So Echoes of the Past, it's actually a funny story how that came about, because I was just messing around with title crawls. Like, it was one of those things that I was kind of experimenting with on my TikTok. Like, yeah, let's have comments come in, share people's stories or their wants for a movie, and then we'll turn it into a title crawl. And then I made one for myself, and I wrote out just this kind of like blurb of where I thought the story would go from Rise of Skywalker. And as soon as I wrote it, I was like, this is going to be an interesting story. And then I got a lot of, when I posted it, a lot of people commented, "Is this a thing? Is this real?" It's like, of course it's not real. I don't work for Lucasfilm, but it got me to thinking, what if I actually wrote this? And so Echoes of the Past came about just from a desire to continue the story, because like one of my main critiques of the sequels is that a lot of characters didn't get their just desserts in terms of like narrative and payoff. And so what I wanted to do with Echoes of the Past was give them that time to shine. So I mean, turning it into an audio drama is just something that comes naturally from my background, because I am a hobbyist voice actor too, and so I did a lot of voice work, voice dubbing from a fan standpoint. And
who have you voice dubbed for?
I haven't done any professional voice acting. I just do a lot of like fan stuff. Like we did a fan dub for Bungo Stray Dogs, which is an anime, and then we did a fan dub of Violet Evergarden, and then I do a lot of kind of voiceovers on an app called Smule, which is typically for karaoke.
I know what that is.
Yeah, and
that's cool that you can use it for that. I didn't think about that before.
Yeah, it was awesome when I found out people were actually using that app to like write scripts instead of write lyrics to songs and then putting over like sound stages and stuff. And I started writing more of the scripts for myself to voice and have other people voice with me. And so that's how that kind of was brought into the Echoes of the Past, and it turned into an audio drama in that sense because I wanted like sounds, I wanted ambience, I wanted the voices, because I know a lot of people do impressions of all the characters that they love, and so I wanted to see if I could actually recreate it in like a sort of hodgepodge sense, just bring all these people together and just create a story that way and have it, presented in a cinematic way, just with words.
I think one of the coolest things is when I first listened to Echoes of the Past, I decided not to like write down a bunch of questions and like process what I was going to ask you. I decided just to listen, and I listened to like the voices of Obi-Wan Kenobi and all of the other actors, and I felt really relaxed about listening to the different actors, and I felt like I could easily relate them to the movie. And I felt like it wasn't like a huge jump to be able to hear it, even though they're different people. Like I thought it matched really well, and it wasn't like jaded. Like I really felt like I was still talking to Obi-Wan, like you could have replaced him with him. And I thought that was really neat how you did that, especially with the other characters.
That's awesome. I thanks for that sentiment, because one of the things that I was thinking about when I was putting this together was obviously casting. And hundreds of auditions came in, and the number one thing that I'm trying to do when I scrutinize these auditions is, can it get close enough to the character but different in a way where it doesn't become like a caricature of it, where it's just we're just the voice is just saying quotes from the movie to sound familiar. The cast needs to emulate that character, but also be able to deliver lines that have never been spoken before. And so I really needed to kind of create that distinction with these voices.
Okay, I got a quick. So wait, with Echoes of the Past, do you have any plans to like release it as an audio drama for podcast through a podcast app, or is it just going to be a YouTube thing?
For now, it's going to be a YouTube thing by episode, just because I kind of want to create that. Well, it's a lot of work, first of all. Second of all, I wanted to create kind of like an air of the suspense to like the suspense that you would get typically, like if you were watching The Mandalorian, you'd watching it from episode to episode, week to week. But I do have plans to once this first book, because there's 3 books that I'm writing. Once this first book is complete and all of the chapters have been released as an audio drama, I do plan to release a full feature length cut of everything put together, and then releasing that in podcast form, so that people have like a sort of like a Echoes of the Past movie drama, audio drama to listen to, like the entire thing. So yeah.
So I would honestly strongly recommend doing it the opposite way and actually do it episodic on a podcasting app, because coming from somebody that listens to 8 to 10 hours of podcasts a day,
he's not joking,
has my own podcast,
really not joking,
have spoken to a lot of podcasters. We, as a podcast listener and a podcast fan, what got me into podcasts was an audio drama named We're Alive. I strongly recommend listening to it. And you will hear voice actors go from kind of amateur to about 10 episodes in, finally fitting into their characters and really rolling through. And listening to that when it was first coming out, I was hyped for when the new episode came out the next week. And Casey Whalen, the creator of it, he's got a new segment coming out, and I am hyped for it. I can't wait for each episode to come out one after another, and he releases them weekly. But I strongly suggest doing the full-length one, maybe after you've released them all episodically, but I would strongly suggest releasing them episodically and building that anticipation and want, and I can't wait till this next one comes out, and people will subscribe, throw on the automatic downloads, throw it so it pops it next on their podcast list, because that's what I do.
Yeah, for sure. I'm most likely going to consider that for, I guess, starting with chapter 1. So yeah, definitely it's present in my mind on how I want to distribute it through like audio podcast channels and stuff.
And the other thing I really strongly suggest for like sound effects, Casey Whalen has, if you go to his YouTube videos and everything and his behind the scenes and everything like that, he does a lot of practical effects. So he just released a new segment called We're Alive, not Lockdown, Gold Rush. And in part of that audio drama, they're riding horses. He went to a horse ranch and he rode different horses while recording the sounds because each horse sounds different. When you pat them on the side, to the way their hooves land, to their physical sounds, they sounded different. So putting that little extra work in will definitely pay off. And he's sitting at the top of audio dramas. He just broke the 300 million download mark.
Wow.
So he puts a lot of work into it. And now he's also doing another podcast starring Lawrence Fishburne. Yeah, so he's got a bunch of stuff going on. I strongly suggest take your time, look into practical effects. Like, there's a lot out there you can learn, and if you put in the hard work in the beginning, the fans will come and it will pay off.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I've played with when I was sound staging for some of the more like amateurish dramas that I did on Smule. But there's definitely a lot of practical effects that I do incorporate, like footsteps and stuff like that. If they have to step on grass, I'll step on grass and record it myself. A lot of cloth and a lot of buckles and stuff like that I will record by myself. Definitely, of course, a lot of the larger in fantastical elements like Porgs and Chewie specifically has to come from what we have.
Yeah.
And of course, like I wasn't able to go to Skellig Island and record that ambiance, but yeah, for sure, a practical effects is definitely high on my list for a lot of the more kind of minutia of the atmosphere.
Man, I feel like I lectured you. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
All right, Pepito. This is how you're gonna make your audio drama.
How did you get the voice for Chewie in Echoes of the Past? Did you did you just record it, or like?
That was actually, I went to YouTube and searched all of Chewie's lines, all of Chewie's sound effects, and I think they have some of them separated using data from Battlefront 2.
Really?
But yeah, some of them is, I don't know if it's a specific Wookiee, but it's the Wookiee hero from Battlefront 2. It's not Chewie specifically, but they, you can make that kind of connection in your head when you hear it.
Yeah,
but,
I definitely thought of Chewie.
Yeah, there's a lot that is Chewie that I got from just like sounds that he's made in the movies.
Nice. So I got a few fun questions for you. So who out of all of Star Wars canon was your favorite Jedi?
Canon, Luke Skywalker, and that wasn't really a thing until The Last Jedi.
Really?
Yeah, because I think now, is it just Jedi or is it just like everything?
No. Like, I'm saying just Jedis because my next question is gonna be out of all, who's your favorite canon Sith?
Mm-hmm.
And then who's your favorite canon non-Jedi, and blah 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 blah.
So Luke for me started out really low on the totem pole. Like, he was very whiny, obviously, and he didn't have much depth to his character until Empire. But even still, from Empire to Return of the Jedi, he was still embodying this sort of pinnacle character, or this kind of character that was held to a really, really high standard and really, really high or really, really low threshold for flaw. Obviously he had his dark side tendencies, but at the end of the day, and it's evidenced by how people view him going into the sequels, how he's just like this hopeful and benevolent Jedi, and he has no tendency for discourse in his character. But it was The Last Jedi that really propelled him up to my top position status, because he was the only character in all of the movies, I mean outside of the prequels, to confront the prequel story. Like we don't get any of obviously we don't get any of the prequels in the originals because they weren't made at the time. But like when you hear Luke talk specifically about the hubris of the Jedi Order and how they fell, and how their methods and their ideologies need to change in order for things to move forward, is just a love letter to the prequels. It's like most people will see the fall of the Jedi Order in the prequels and be like, oh yeah, that happened because, you know, Darth Vader had to become Darth Vader.
Yeah, so I don't know, I blanked into something different when I heard him say that, because there was this line that I remember hearing it, I can just never find it, where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were doing something, and he was like, I think Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan said the council's never gonna let you change the boy, and I just remember Qui-Gon saying something along the lines of, well, there are things about something about the Jedi need to change, and I cannot remember for the life of me where it was, and I don't have my original DVD anymore. But I thought that was when Luke was talking about how the old Jedi need to change. I instantly thought of Qui-Gon when he said that, because Qui-Gon, outside of Obi-Wan, I don't think Qui-Gon ever showed any, like, how do I put it? I don't want to say loyalty or disloyalty to the Jedi or loyalty to the Jedi. I believe he was only loyal to the Force.
Yes, for sure. He's definitely one of the most shining examples of what a Jedi should have been, coming from the old Jedi and the old ways of the prime Jedi, because they were trying to achieve balance, and the only way to achieve balance is to just let the Force flow. You cannot exert your force onto it. You cannot try to bend it, and you just have to listen to the will. And so when Qui-Gon is listening to the will over the will of the Council, that's like, Qui-Gon's your dude, man. He knows what's up, and he has no kind of like ulterior motives to kind of achieve. He's just trying his best to serve the Force, and that's ultimately what Luke came to when he was teaching Rey about the ways of the old and how it caused him to ultimately fail his own student, and that was what propelled him to the top spot for me.
Oh, you mentioned his student, and that brought something up, because just watching the movies, I distinctly remember saying that when Kylo destroyed his temple and left, he took the Knights of Ren with him. And when we see the Knights of Ren in The Rise of Skywalker, they're all using vibroblades.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were students of Luke, wouldn't they already have had their lightsabers?
So they're not actually students of Luke. He wasn't part of the Knights of Ren during that time. So if you read the Rise of Kylo Ren comics, he did leave the Jedi Order after that incident with Luke, and he tried to run away, and Luke's students did chase after him. But Snoke put him on the trail to meet up with the Knights of Ren, who was being led at the time by Ren, like the original Ren. And there was a conflict, and his students were Luke's students were killed, and Kylo Ren killed the last one before he finally turned into Ren, and then he killed the original Ren at that time. So they weren't his students, and they were just like a group of like stunted Force users who went around trying to recruit people who were also similarly stunted in the Force sensitivity.
Okay, so next question. Who's your favorite Sith of the canon series?
So that is a toss-up between Darth Maul and Darth Vader. And the reason being, Darth Vader for the longest time was my favorite, until Darth Maul. We got more of Darth Maul in the Clone Wars, in particular season 7, where we finally get to see what he's done with Mandalore, and what he's potentially going to do with the Shadow Collective and the Crimson Dawn, and just his interaction with Ahsoka, and how he knew a lot of the things that nobody else knew, and he potentially had the power within himself to possibly change the course of history. And so it is like a balancing act, and I do kind of tend to veer towards one direction or over the other in certain times. Right now, it would have to lean more towards Darth Vader because I'm currently like just deep in his new 2020 comic by Greg Pak, and so it just has to deal with what I'm consuming at the time. So if I'm reading Darth Maul and I'm just all in Darth Maul's story, then it could be him. And right now it's Darth Vader for what he's doing in the current comic series.
So outside of that, who's your favorite non-Force user in canon?
In canon, this is probably going to shock a lot of people, but it's most probably Sabine Wren from Star Wars Rebels.
Really? I love Sabine because she's just this awesome, I don't give a crap, I'm gonna do what I want Mandalorian who can she would rather spray paint than shoot a gun, but she's totally not afraid to shoot a gun. Like,
and she's very capable.
Yeah, she's super capable. For crying out loud, I was so hoping when she got the dark blade the dark saber, that I don't know, some like latent Force abilities would come up and then Kanan would be like, crap, now I got 2 students.
Yeah.
But I was so hoping for another Force sensitive Mandalorian in Sabine. And I was kind of disappointed I didn't get her, but hands down, she's my favorite non-Force user in canon.
Absolutely. I agree for all of the sentiments that you brought up, but in particular, I'm actually a fan of her because she wasn't Force sensitive. She got the Darksaber. She even learned that she was directly descended from the first Mandalorian who was a Jedi. And then, not to mention now, she has his Darksaber. So it's like, maybe she could be Force sensitive, but at the same time, it says a lot more about her character that she can persist and persevere without being Force sensitive. She has all the skills in the world. When she fought Gar Saxon for the Darksaber in Rebels, she did all that without any. That was her skills alone and her mastery of the Darksaber and how Kanan trained her, and I love that.
So, speaking of Rebels, do you ever think we're going to see Ezra come back? And if so, do you think Thrawn's coming with him?
That's a tough one. I think that if they ever pursue a Rebel sequel, they would have to explore that. I don't think they would be able to explore a Star Wars Rebel sequel and just not address the elephant in the room. So I think Ezra would be able to come back. By which method he does, I'm not sure, and I think by proxy alone, they would have to explore what happened to Thrawn as well, because they both kind of like went in the same direction. So you can't really write someone out.
Yeah, they both went in the same direction at the same time on the same battle cruiser. Like, there was no getting around it. But that's the last episode of Rebels, spoiler, kept like that put me on my edge simply because Hera and Ahsoka was like, let's go find Ezra.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard rumors that Ahsoka is going to be in The Mandalorian Season 2. And I'm sitting here going...
That would be awesome.
I'm sitting here going, okay. So this could be the start of a Rebels 2 series, or hints to a Rebel 2 series, because she's on the path to finding Ezra, and she comes across the Mandalorian with the child.
Yeah, so if you think back at like the World Between Worlds episode in Rebels, the last thing Ezra says to Ahsoka is, "Come find me."
Yeah.
Right, and so the next time they never get to see each other again after that, and so the next time we see Ahsoka in reference to Ezra is that she's going to find him. So I think if we see Ahsoka in season 2, we're going to have to, that's another elephant in the room that they have to address. Ahsoka is going to have to be looking for Ezra, or if not having found him already.
Yeah. I don't know. I loved Rebels. I liked Rebels more than I liked Clone Wars.
Absolutely.
There was so much, they expanded so much on the just what was happening during the Empire's rule. They showed the oppression of the Empire. It was eye opening because honestly, the way the movies make you think is it's like 16 years later and there's an established empire, but nobody's really talking. No, you don't get to see what the citizens are going through. And in Rebels, they show that. They show that the stormtroopers are basically acting like Nazis.
Yeah, it's a lived-in galaxy, and that's one of the things that they try to do in the movies as well. Is like, you know, a lot of people will complain that every single Star Wars movie has a cantina scene or something like that.
Why is that a complaint?
I have no idea, but you know, it's there for a reason to show that people are still living, even if like the rebels or the resistance is going through some tough times. They're like, even the Cantabite scene, people were just having a ball because that's the rich and the powerful. They're actually making money off of the war. So one of the things about showing a lived-in galaxy is that it shows that there's life outside of the war. And you know, that's not something that a lot of people talk about even in real life, because like, you know, the what is that, the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan, like a lot of people still just live their lives day to day and just it wasn't affecting them directly. So I completely lost train of thought there.
It's okay. Lived in galaxy, not all about being with the war, showing that there's people that are affected and not affected by the war. People that make money off the war.
What was the thought before that? What were we talking about in terms of like? Oh, right. So I was going to say one of the more controversial opinions that I have, and I am in agreement with you, is that I loved Rebels more than Clone Wars, and I'm not going to, you know, go into depth with all of the elements of why I thought it was better, but like just the main thing is that Clone Wars is riding on the coattails of the movies, and it's showing us the in-betweens, and it's giving us Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka, and you know, Yoda and Mace and everyone that we recognize from the movies, whereas Rebels gives us a whole new story around a whole new crew with original characters, and it makes you fall in love with these characters, and we don't have to like be so dependent or reliant on seeing Obi-Wan and Anakin in the next episode or in like all of the episodes.
And on top of that, Rebels was so good they added the Ghost into Rogue One.
Yeah.
Like the Ghost was in Rogue One, and that blew my mind when I seen it. I was like, "That's the Ghost."
The Ghost was in the Battle of Exegol too, and it's like it's amazing to think that like that crew was so good, whether or not it's like, you know, the same crew we knew from Rebels, or if it's just like kind of like maybe it's Jason in that time period. But it's awesome to think that ship has survived from the Battle of Scarif to the Battle of Exegol, and they've just been like with Leia for like the entire time.
And that was one thing that I really wish they would have added into the movies or into the books or even into the comics. I want to know how Hera took it when Leia passed away.
Yeah.
I want to know how Sabine took it, how Ahsoka took it, like, because at that point they would have had to have known Leia. They would have been fighting next to her. They would have been going on.
Yeah.
And like, I just wish somebody would address that.
If you watch Forces of Destiny, they I think, I'm not sure, I remember who meets who, but I know that like Hera meets Han and Leia meets Jyn Erso, and all of these people are like just coming together in Forces of Destiny, and there's you know, they might not have that like that Anakin Ahsoka connection, but they still kind of just like they meet each other because they're in passing, because they're in the Rebel Alliance, right? And so they're all fighting the same enemy. They're gonna meet eventually, yeah, and so that's why I like Forces of Destiny. It might be a very like, you know, traditionally cartoony kiddie show, and it's short, but it's easily digestible, and it's canon. So if you ever need like that, like, you know, party trivia about like Star Wars, like, oh, did you know that Hera and Han met? And Han said Hera was the better pilot. Then there you go.
Yeah. Yes.
Wait, Han actually admitted there was a better pilot? This is
He's-
real?
That was like jovial in nature. Like they were kind of bantering back and forth, and she was like, just admit it. He's like, fine. Like, you know, it wasn't like one of those things that he was making a declarative statement. He's like, okay, you're the better pilot. I admit it.
Nice.
Oh, jeez.
Speaking of Star Wars animated series, what's your thoughts on Star Wars Resistance?
Man, it had potential. It really did. Because just like with all of the other trilogy eras, they all had something. They all had supportive media. Clone Wars, Rebels, and now Resistance was supposed to be that for the sequels. But it was definitely a slow burn. It didn't really pick up until like episode 6 of season 1. But after they had left that one planet, I'm blanking on the planet's name, and they had started exploring the galaxy again, and it was just this, it was Star Wars again. That show started picking up steam, and I was hoping that we would get a lot more of it, maybe up until season 4 at least, just like Rebels. But I thought it was an interesting show. It lended a lot of interesting characters to the sequel trilogy. It gave us a lot of, like, you know, where Poe was and where Phasma was, and we got some Kylo Ren. So I thought it had that potential that the Rebels did for the original trilogy.
I wanted another season, and I just don't know if they're going to do anything more with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they canceled it. I'm not sure if I have confirmation on that.
I believe it was canceled, or it's going to be a Disney Plus exclusive. I'm not sure.
But there is still the possibility that the Rebel sequels could kind of venture into the sequel timeline.
Yes,
So,
that would. I mean, I wouldn't be mad if they brought Rebels and Resistance together, and
Star Wars Rebel Resistance.
I wouldn't be mad at that.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
I'd watch that. And thank you for not saying your favorite non-Force user was Boba Fett.
I mean, this may be controversial. I just don't get the hype. Like, he had like literally 2 minutes or 2 lines in the original trilogy.
Yes, thank you. Everybody's like, Boba Fett is so badass. I was like, okay, let's look at his original work. I'm going to stand here and look like I have a helmet on. I'm going to say, get my finger pointing at me and say, no disintegration.
As you wish.
And then, yeah, as you wish. And then I'm going to stand in the corner of a slug's hut, and then I'm going to get hit in the back by a pole and shoved down a pit.
Yeah. And it's so funny how they both went out, you know, like it was such silly antics. Like, obviously he got whopped by Mace, but that was such an uneventful fight, like Jango, his father. And then Boba just, like, you know, got whopped into the Sarlacc pit. And so I don't understand, like, obviously years and years after we got the Boba Fett and the Jango Fett comics from Dark Horse. But, like, if you came out of the original trilogy being a huge stan of Boba Fett, I just didn't understand it. Like, there wasn't much of him.
So, he looked cool. That was it.
As far as Boba Fett goes, when you read the comics, did he escape from the Sarlacc pit? I'm just checking, because I've heard rumors that he did. But
So there was one in an old comic that showed him using his jetpack to get out of the Sarlacc pit, and yet he's supposed to make an appearance in The Mandalorian. I'm not 100% sure that's how he got out. I've also heard that he blasted his way out and then dug through the sand to get out too. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been a while since I read the Dark Horse comics, like maybe 10 years. So I'm a little foggy on the details on that. But you're right. There are some instances where he does escape in the Legends continuity. And I guess they're going to kind of adapt that to The Mandalorian, because obviously he's confirmed to appear again.
Okay. So speaking of The Mandalorian, I got another question. Everybody's all hyped up about Baby Yoda. What's your theory on who he is? I mean, I always call him Baby Yoda because that's what everyone else does. But
you covered this in a TikTok.
I did, yes.
What's your theory?
So I think I think the child has a lot to do with what Plagueis and Palpatine were doing at the time, because they were trying to manipulate the Force. They were trying to manipulate the midichlorians to create life. That's the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, or the tragedy. And a lot of people will think, hey, so that means they created Anakin Skywalker. But, George Lucas is on record saying he's never going to reveal Anakin's origin. And in the comic, obviously, that was just like a vision of his nightmare where Palpatine was, had his hands around Padme, but we're not Padme Shmi. So that's obviously just kind of like that's not like what actually happened. And so the child was born 41 BBY, the same year as Anakin. And I'm thinking that Plagueis and Palpatine succeeded in creating life. They just didn't create Anakin. And I think the child is that one being.
So you think he's like a secret Sith overlord that they somehow manipulated with a chip in his head? Or like...
Well, I don't think they would be able to just create a Sith. Like Sith is an ideology, right? And so you'd have to subscribe to that idea set. And so I think what happened is they were trying to create the Anakin. The child was born out of those manipulations of the midichlorians somewhere off in the galaxy. And, as soon as like the Jedi fixated on Anakin being the chosen one, they just like, their focus shifted. They were just strictly, focused on Anakin and trying to manipulate him to turn to the dark side. And they just lost sight of the child. And so what we're seeing in The Mandalorian is, I think during the time of The Mandalorian, the Emperor is like, hey, I think there's something that we need to, this child is very important to us, and we need to capture the child in that way.
So you want to hear my little conspiracy theory?
Go for it.
I think Darth Plagueis and Cypher Diaz are the same person.
Elaborate.
Okay, so Darth Plagueis was all about creating life.
Mm-hmm.
Cypher Diaz went to a planet of cloners, made a whole bunch of clones for a war that was coming. Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious planned this whole thing, and the only thing Darth Plagueis didn't see coming was the fact that Darth Sidious betrayed him and killed him. Around the same time, Cypher Diaz wiped the whole planet from the Jedi records and then disappeared.
Interesting. The only reason I wouldn't subscribe to that conspiracy theory is because they both existed in the same time.
Exactly.
So are you saying that he transferred he did an essence transfer into Sifo as he was being assassinated?
No, I think straight out they were the same person. He was just not revealing the fact that he was a dark side user to the Jedi Council, and he was being in the shadows while having his pupil Darth Sidious.
So they weren't two different people. He was just obviously doing the same Force conceal.
Person. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I mean Darth Sidious hid his dark side abilities from the Jedi Council and until he was like in charge of the Senate. Who did he learn that from? Somebody that was already doing it, that had infiltrated the Jedi.
It's a very crazy and plausible theory, actually.
See, now I get you.
Just the look on your face. I'm not making fun of you. It's cool seeing the gear. It's cool seeing the gears turn.
There's one like speed bump is that who did Palpatine or who did Sidious actually kill in his sleep then, which is a question that needs to be answered if there was more weight to that theory.
So Sidious's real name is Palpatine.
Yeah.
So Darth Plagueis' real name would be Cypher Diaz. So when Cypher Diaz was killed in his sleep, so was Darth Plagueis.
But Cypher wasn't killed in his sleep, though.
How was Cypher Diaz killed?
He was going back to Camino to check on the original order of the clones that he ordered for the Republic, and Tyrannus actually got the Pikes. Was it either the Pike Syndicate or another cartel that they got them to shoot his starfighter out of the sky, and they ambushed him. And that's why we see in the Clone Wars, like whenever they're investigating Sifo Dyas's death, there's his like starfighter wreckage and stuff like that. But that's the official, from the books.
I don't remember seeing a body in that starship crash.
Yeah, there's no body there either. But that, I mean,
So-
yeah, it's just kind of we're trying to reconcile
Yeah,
the theory with the larger.
I mean,
continuity.
I know. There's a larger picture and there's larger continuity, but I thought of that like way back in the day when everything was going on, and I was just like, hold on, if Sidious could go into infiltrate the whole government and the Jedi have no knowledge of him until the very end, why couldn't his master do it at a level where they didn't realize a Sith Lord was a Jedi Knight?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go. I mean, it is plausible from when you present it in such a way. But if you think about Sifo Dyas's early life and his training with Yoda, there's a lot of speed bumps in that. So like because his early life leading on to his trying to work with Dooku at that time to kind of raise an army for the Republic. There's a lot of things that we would need to. There's a lot of holes that we would need to plug up to make him truly like Darth Plagueis concealed.
Didn't Yoda have a situation where he almost turned to the dark side, like or at all? Because like he learned about his dark side like in the Clone Wars, like he had to face himself in one of the Clone Wars episodes, and I thought that was really cool. So I'm wondering if like Yoda and Sifo Dyas had like the same kind of relationship, kind of like Luke and Kylo Ren, where Yoda feared something and had to get rid of something. Or I don't know. I just think it's. I don't know. I'm just wondering if it could have happened.
Well, there's not much material in terms of like Sifo Dyas's early life, other than like in passing material describing Yoda having like has trained like 10,000 Jedi. So there, his connection with a lot of the Jedi Order, starting from 800 BBY all the way to the original trilogy, there's just a lot there that hasn't been fully explored.
Are we gonna get a picture of him at 700 years old in the Old Republic training Jedi? I thought we were.
Yeah, they did confirm on StarWars.com that Yoda is in the High Republic stories, the High Republic adventures, and at that time he's like 664 or something like that. Because yeah, it's like 232 BBY, the High Republic, and I'm forgetting when exactly Yoda was born, but he should be midway between 600 and 700.
Okay. I was like, well, we're going to get to see some of his early life, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, I did a TikTok on it. I'm excited to see just what 200 years of youth does to Yoda. Because like, if he could do what he could against Palpatine, like, and that was like literally like within 20 years of his death, if he could do that much, and in particularly like right before the prequels, he's literally shown force pushing a mountain. I'm wondering,
what?
Yeah. So like in one of the Clone Wars shorts where it wasn't part of Clone Wars, but it was like one of those like one-offs that they showed on like Disney XD, or not Disney XD,
Okay.
like on Disney or Cartoon Network. Sorry. He literally force pushed a mountain, and that's like the pinnacle of feats that we've seen aside from Luke's force projection in canon. So I'm interested to know just how much we haven't seen of him 200 years prior to that, like when he's not, on the verge of his death, at least, or in the latter years of his life.
I kind of want to see him pull down a ship from the sky, kind of like Rey did.
No. That was Darth Vader's Padawan in The Force Awakens, where he pulled a Star Destroyer out of the sky.
But Rey did the same thing. It was like a little ship. It wasn't a Star Destroyer. But like something like that.
When you're talking about when she's holding on to Kylo Ren's ship and not letting it leave.
Yeah, and then she kills Chewbacca supposedly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I think in terms of like maybe not a Star Destroyer, but in terms of like a ship like that, I think we'd get something very similar to Yoda coming into Palpatine's office. He'd just wave his hand and it would come down. I mean, that's how powerful I think he is, like on his best day.
Well, if we look at the child who is 50 years old and the Force abilities he's used in The Mandalorian, holy crap, like Yoda's going, especially if you subscribe to the conspiracy theory that Yoda and that other Jedi Master of the same race, I can't remember her name.
Yaddle,
yes. Yoda and Yaddle. If you subscribe to the belief that the child is from an affair they had, then that child would be stupid strong.
Yeah. Well, we don't know too much about Yoda species just fundamentally. So we don't know their physiology, how they age, and in particular,
home planet.
What we do know is that the only two in canon were Jedi Masters on the Council. So it's kind of like maybe this is just a race of highly Force-sensitive individuals.
Well, I've also heard the fact that there is an actual race that solely uses the dark side called the Sith. There's a race called the Sith. So Yoda, I've heard that on the other side of the scale is Yoda and Yaddle's race, where their race is the exact opposite of the Sith, where all the Sith are born as like, hey, guess what? I'm super badass in the dark side of the Force. I don't get Force rot. Like, I'm awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Where Yoda and Yaddle, when they're born, they're like, we are. I guess a better way to compare it, it's like the Fire Nation versus the Air Nomads.
Yeah, it makes sense. If they're like, they're definitely. I mean, going back to Legends continuity, there was a lot of like different Force using alien species, like the Rakata, and there was. It would make sense that if there is like a Nexus species for the dark side, there would be a Nexus species for the light, and I do subscribe to the thought that Yoda's species, or just Yoda in particular, is a paragon of light, just like Ahsoka is by way of Mirai, the daughter. But Yoda is, and his species in particular, is a paragon of light just by species or inheritance alone.
Yeah, I always subscribe to the thought that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were both paragons of light as well.
Mm-hmm. They do have their. I mean, Obi-Wan did show a little bit of dark side tendency, but he never really strayed too far.
The one thing I really wanted to happen was I wanted him and the Queen of Mandalore to actually be a thing, but I know they would never betray Obi-Wan's character by doing that.
Now, I don't think it would be a betrayal. It would actually add more to his character in the correct direction.
Yeah.
Because we do see him say, if you had said the word, I would have left the order. So he's not beyond having those illicit affairs. Or should I call them illicit? He's not beyond, that.
He's not beyond having those feelings. And I honestly thought that she was the one for him. And if they did have a child, that they would either be the most badass bounty hunter / Mandalorian in the galaxy, or the New Hope. I think that person could have instantly replaced Luke, and I was almost subscribed to the whole Rey Kenobi thing, and I was like, the only way that it could have been her as being a Kenobi is if they did have a secret affair, and that would make her half Mandalorian, which would then go back to being a Mandalorian Jedi, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, that's actually a lot of deep lore there that would, shake the foundations of the Star Wars universe. I mean, there is a way that it works where he's still a Padawan and he's not, trying to train Anakin. Like, he's not trying to uphold these edicts from the Order. His master is literally a person that just like, don't, follow the Force, don't, be bogged down by these decrees and this code. And so at that time, when he's still a Padawan under Qui-Gon and he's on Mandalore protecting Satine at that time, he could have had an affair with her. And by the time he gets to become a Jedi Master and he's, the Obi-Wan that we know, where he's very staunch in his beliefs and his loyalty to the code. We have Corky Kenobi, who is surprisingly, Bo-Katan and Satine's nephew with like a hidden sister we don't know about. And where's that family tree? We don't know. So Corky Kenobi could very well be the love child of Obi-Wan and Satine, and could go on to have had a family, a daughter, who could go on to have met Palpatine's failed Strandcast son, who could have gone on to birth Rey, and she could be a Rey Kenobi in that sense. She would be a Kenobi of Palpatine at that point, but it's fun to think about those kind of like story threads.
It's not a Kenobi Palpatine. That would give me a heart attack. Don't do that. No. I don't want to die before the end of this podcast. Stop it.
I know. I feel like that would have been really good for Kenobi in itself. And don't get me wrong, I love the path that they chose for Ben, and I can't wait to read, because I just started reading again this Star Wars 2018, everything that goes on in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, because I don't know if they've ended that comic book series yet, because I want to get to where they go into Empire Strikes Back, in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And
They did.
oh, they did end it?
Yeah, so there's a new Marvel Star Wars 2020. I forget who writes it again, but I have done a couple of TikToks on that, and
Yeah.
they're exploring Empire to return.
I know, and I want to comment on it. Spoiler alert so much, but all I have to do is just go read the comic books, and I would get the full picture of them and everything else. So, yeah. Oh, speaking of the comic books and everything, what did you think of that hut that was collecting lightsabers? And that specifically that led up to the scene with Han, Leia, Luke, and Chewie all wielding lightsabers.
That would be so cool.
It happened. It's in the comic books. It's canon.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. There's a lot in the comics that going from Legends to more of the obscure titles on like in the canon continuity that is just like what. So yeah, I'm not really particularly a huge fan of that scene in general, or of any hut really.
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of the Old Republic lately, and I was on Nar Shaddaa, and I do not like the huts on there. They're all just backstabbing traitors and however they can get profit. Like,
I guess the only hut you could possibly come to like at this point is from Resistance, where they went to that one kind of like casino place.
Oh,
yeah.
I guess. But,
So, what do you treasure most about what you do?
I guess the most I would treasure is just the ability to reach people, the ability to finally give them that sense of peace that they've had, because I know like the best comments that I will get are the comments that say you've changed my mind. I finally like these movies, or I could finally let go of my hate for these movies. And that's probably the best thing that can happen to a creator like me, who's trying to get people to just enjoy what they're a fan of, because like, how can you be a fan of something if you're just constantly complaining? And so that's probably the most important thing to me with what I do, is just reaching people and getting them to just, release the hate, come back to the light, and, bring balance to the force.
That's a good way of putting it.
So on the other hand, how do you deal with gatekeepers?
Oh, I was looking forward to this question. You took it.
So I have a zero tolerance policy on my TikToks for anyone who just starts from like at 100.
Before we even start, can you kind of help explain what a gatekeeper is in your opinion, just so we can clarify for some of the listeners?
Perfect example. You don't know enough about Star Wars to like it. You can't like this.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So
okay.
A gatekeeper is basically anybody who tries to curate the experience for another fan. If a gatekeeper says you're not a true fan, or if a person says that, he's a gatekeeper, or he or she is a gatekeeper, or they. If they say, you don't know enough, they're a gatekeeper. If they say, you're a girl, you can't be a fan, they're a gatekeeper. If there's any like criteria, or if there's any kind of requirement other than having enjoyed Star Wars, they're gatekeeping. So if you say to someone, I watched Solo, I watched Rogue One, I liked the movie, I'm a Star Wars fan now, I'm going to watch everything else, and they're like, oh, you've only seen Rogue One or Solo? You're not a true fan. That is a gatekeeper for sure.
I don't understand the hate for Han Solo's movie. That movie was awesome.
I loved it.
It was everything we need. It was a funny, quirky, super cool space pirate movie in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. and it really dragged Han Solo through the mud. It wasn't like a laud fest where it was just like, this is how cool Han Solo is. Like, no, he really went through the ringer in this movie and kind of showed us where he started and how he got to the cool Han Solo.
Yeah. And the one thing I hate is everybody goes, oh, at the end of the movie, they're going straight into A New Hope. I was like, No, they're not. They're going to the reason that Jabba the Hutt is hunting him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they left it open for a whole nother movie of how Jabba the Hutt puts a bounty on Han Solo's head that then would lead into a New Hope. There's a big gap there.
Yeah,
Y'all
it's 15 years.
So back to the previous question, how do you deal with gatekeepers? Like, what's a good way to like bring balance to the Force, in your words?
So when they start at 100 and they're just like being very, aggressive and, ad hominem with their arguments, I tend to just block them straight out because, like, I don't know, there's a limit to who I'll reach out to. Now, if someone is just in disagreement with me,
mm-hmm.
I'll try to find out what they're disagreeing with, and then I'll try to kind of change the narrative or reframe the narrative in a way where they can see the larger picture or try to gain a little perspective that they're lacking. In terms of just a straight up gatekeeper, there's nothing that I could really say to them or handle them in a way that they wouldn't become a gatekeeper. Because that stuff is a lot of it is like hugely personal problems and like how they're dealing with stuff in their life, and I don't want to pretend to presume that I know what they're going through, and it has a lot to do with their socioeconomic upbringing and how they were raised and what like environment they were raised in, and whether or not they were being pushed into like this kind of, maybe this might be controversial to say, like toxic masculinity type of mentality going like growing up.
Okay.
So
that's not controversial to say. No, gatekeeping and saying, hey, you can't like Star Wars because you're a girl is completely toxic masculinity. Please believe. I have 3 girls I'm raising and 1 boy. They're all Star Wars fans. And if any dude says straight out, you can't be a Star Wars fan because you're a girl, I'll punch that dude straight to his face. There's no, like, for crying out loud, my daughter's first toy, my daughter Addison's first toy was a lightsaber I got from Disney on Ice. All right?
That's awesome.
Like, I have pictures of her sleeping next to it because she wouldn't let it go.
And that should be the only thing that's required to be a fan. Is just be a fan.
Yeah, like, I don't see, this is why I don't understand why people get so passionate about hating on people that are like, oh yeah, my favorite thing about Star Wars was the Ewoks, or I loved Jar Jar Binks. I will high five them because I'd be like, have you heard the conspiracy theory that Jar Jar Binks is a Sith Lord?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
honestly,
there shouldn't be any like barometer or kind of measuring stick as to like how much of a fan you are. If you're a fan, you're a fan. That's it.
Yeah. And honestly, there's nothing about loving something that should cause anybody to hate something. So
kind of along those lines, we kind of talked about gatekeeping, but what are some other challenges that you can come up with in doing what you do, whether it's for Echoes of the Past or Element 7, your YouTube channel? Like, what are some challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them? Maybe it's fans, maybe it's lore, maybe it could be anything. What's something that sticks out to you?
Probably trying to know everything, because like
know everything.
In terms of like TikTok, a lot of people will say like lore king or this guy knows everything about Star Wars, but there's a lot that I still don't know. I haven't read every single piece of material out there. So there will be questions that I get in my comment section where I just don't know, and I have to kind of do my research, and then that's like the biggest challenge for what I do is trying to just be able to know all of these things that people expect me to know, and maintaining that kind of air of like what they prescribe me to be. But it also, it helps because I'm still furthering my knowledge. So if I don't know something and I'm going to go and read the book about it, and I'm just going to be like, okay, now I know. In terms of Echoes of the Past, the pandemic is definitely a challenge because doing everything remotely, not being able to meet with actors, and not being able to just like congregate and have like table reads in the traditional sense where we're all sitting around a table and just gaining perspective on what we're reading at the time. Lore accuracy and consistency as well, because there's a lot of conflicting lore elements in Star Wars, whether it's Legends continuity or canon continuity, and trying to remain consistent so that I respect Lucas's, overall fabrication of the mythology, but at the same time trying to bring in something fresh, trying to create something new based on that established mythology. And then there's of course like the normal challenges of writing something like Echoes of the Past is like character bloat and character responsibility, which is what I call like not having a character in there for the sake of having them there, but actually giving them something to do, giving them an arc. And so like currently where I am at right now in terms of the book's development, there's a chapter where there's like at least 30 people in one scene, and I'm just like, this is crazy. Like when I first started the book, it was just Rey and Finn, they're gonna meet Obi-Wan, but like as you start to write the book and as you start to reach your story beats, more and more characters come into play, and then you've got like 10 people over here and like another planet, and then 10 people on another planet, and you're like juggling all of these story threads together, and they're all doing their separate things, and then they all come together, and you have to like put those puzzle pieces together. That is a tough thing to juggle, and as well as in the midst of all of that, trying to give them all meaningful arcs instead of just having them there.
Okay, so talking about character arcs, so me and James, we're eventually going to do a D&D podcast later, and we're learning how to write our own characters right now, and I have one called Roki, but I was kind of just trying to research like how to make your own characters. So when you're talking about making these characters, whether it's in Echoes of the Past or in this group of like 30 people, do you start with the end of that character in mind? Do you start with the beginning? What's
your starting point?
Yeah, what's your starting point?
I definitely start with the beginning, and then I go with the end, because you have to know how the character is going to fundamentally change throughout the course of the story. And so everything in between that happens has to line up with that end. And I think that's probably the best way to approach character building or character design, is knowing how the person starts and knowing how he's going to ultimately change, and then formulating the arc based on point A to point B. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm actually opposite of that. The way I designed my character was I went into Hero Forge, I designed this super awesome character, and I was like, okay, how did my character become this? And I went back to the beginning and I wrote this whole thing out for him, and I gave him kind of that I'm best friends with the greatest person in the world, but I'm going to tell my own story.
Mm-hmm.
So he was always in the shadow of greatness. And now he's at the point of his life where he's going to go be great himself. And he's going to surround himself with people that are all striving to be great as well. And together they're going to become legends.
Nice. Yeah, that approach definitely works as well, in particularly if you do have a character that starts in a certain place first, like their ending is their starting point, if that makes sense. And it's definitely how I'm approaching writing the villain for this book, because he starts as the villain and I have to work backwards to create how he got there. So like there's definitely no wrong way to go about character building, as long as you know how that character fundamentally changes. If you know Metamorphosis B, then you can work backwards and kind of get an origin from there. But if you know A and B at the same time, then everything in between will come together, I think, a lot smoother in terms of character building.
Okay, we've reached that time where we got to wrap things up, and I hate saying that because I want to talk to you more and more and more and more, and just nerd out with you on Star Wars.
I could be here for like 4 hours and be just fine.
Yeah, definitely. So we are definitely going to invite you back after Echoes of the Past is released, and you have at least your first book out, or season 1.
Yeah.
So we can talk about the trials and tribulations that you went through with that, because you're still working on it. So we definitely want to see how everything is at the end game of it. So on closing words, is there any what do you want to tell somebody that's looking at Star Wars, like, where should I even begin?
If the question is where do I begin, it's literally a one-line answer: A New Hope. You start there, and then you can it can go in any direction you want from there, because there's a lot of content out there, and I know it can be very overwhelming for people. It's like, okay, I want to get into the books, where do I begin? I want to get into the comics, where do I begin? So I always tell them to start with A New Hope, and then go on to Empire Strikes Back, and then go on to Return of the Jedi. And once you have that foundation of like the world building from where Lucas began, then you can start to branch out into the stories you want to hear, because then you can go on to the prequels, or you can go on to like Rogue One and say, hey, I'm interested to see what happened before A New Hope. You could literally watch the series after the original in surprising orders, and not in chronological order. Well, of course, if you're going to watch the trilogies, they should be, chronological. But in terms of going from trilogy to trilogy to trilogy, and then like the spin-offs and the anthology movies and the TV shows, you can create some interesting dynamic within yourself watching things out of order, just like the whole saga was out of order to begin with.
So, is there anyone you'd like to thank before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for having me on the podcast. It's an honor. My family for their, unending support in my dreams and passions. And of course, my girlfriend also for her support and sharing in the journey. All of your listeners, all of my fans who make what I do worthwhile every single day. And I would like to thank George Lucas as well.
Yeah,
right.
I need to thank that guy too. If I ever see George Lucas, I'm giving that dude a hug, because
Me too.
He's influenced my entire life.
Lord knows he deserves one.
Yeah, and I just, to all the haters out there, if you don't like Star Wars, who cares? Just get over it. Go find something else.
Yeah, find something you enjoy. Focus, because your focus determines your reality, right? That's something Qui-Gon said. And if you don't like something, okay, go find something you like, and just and like laud that. I did a video very, very early on. I think I had like 200 followers at the time, where I was like, not like spending your time hating on something rather than enjoying it. It's like finding a turd in the field and just like being disgusted by it, but continuing to be there and staring at it and smelling it. Right? You're completely grossed out. It smells horrid, and you're just like, I'm gonna look at it and smell it for the rest of my life, and I wouldn't rather be doing anything else. So it's like, yeah, you're just like, go find something that's not gross to you,
That is a great analogy.
I can't read what I'm supposed to do to end this.
You broke the co-host.
You broke me. Oh my gosh.
But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking this time. It was so much fun having you on.
Absolutely. I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
So thank you for joining us on Creators Anonymous. We are asking for your help. If you know someone that deserves to have their story told, or have any questions about supporting this creator or any others we have interviewed,
let us know on Twitter at CreatorZAnon with a Z, or email me at creatorzanon@gmail.com. And you can always chat with me live in the Cast Junkie Discord. And until next time, everyone, stay creative.